I started my career in the internet in 1995, and at that moment I felt that we were missing a guide. The rate of the internet growth is amazing. You have more mobile phones than persons in Brazil, but we still have a huge market to acquire. There is no other way to do that without investing in technology. Google has all the tools, all the capability of developing this business. The tools that the publisher are going to have in their hands are going to be much better than today. Eu acredito que as oportunidades do mercado brasileiro são muito grandes. Se nós pudermos copiarmos algumas oportunidades que estão acontecendo no mercado americano e também entender oportunidades únicas do nosso país e o Google puder nos ajudar a desenvolver as oportunidades, o sucesso será maior ainda no futuro.
Thank you, Sergio. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Shane Peros with the Partner Business Solutions team in the U.S. I'm joined by David Chiang and Greg Stevens. David from CBS Interactive and Greg from Liberty Advertising. You know, in the U.S., we talk a great deal about programmatic buying and selling of media. So much so that actually the underlying technology of real-time bidding is now just really referred to as programmatic. So it's become that language between buyers and sellers, or that accepted language between buyers and sellers, of just saying we're doing a programmatic deal. It's no longer RTB, or real-time bidding. You know, Benita talked earlier about the tremendous growth that we've seen in the US and really globally around programmatic. And with that said, you know, we're starting to do many more larger revenue deals there, many more formats, and big brand advertisers are really starting to spend their dollars in a programmatic fashion. So even with all that, we're really still in the early days. The true promises of programmatic still haven't yet come true for us. Better margins, streamlined business, and the real dollars that we think this will be, as Benita talked earlier, this will be billions and billions of dollars in the marketplace, and it'll be a $13 billion market of just programmatic itself. So a lot of exciting things ahead of us. But really, when you start to think about companies like Kellogg, spending 70% of their display advertising in a programmatic fashion. There are other companies like P&G, companies like GM that are really leaning into this, and big brand budgets that are coming online. We have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of work to do in the US and on a global basis to really take advantage of this. So we talked earlier about programmatic everywhere. We talked about programmatic direct. But what I really wanted to do was take a step back and really understand from my guests here today where programmatic started for them, the things that they learned along the way. How did that progress from them? And things that we could actually learn to take advantage of as partners. So with that being said, you know, there are a lot of definitions around programmatic out there in the marketplace. And David, why don't we start with you? But you know, it used to be network buying, then it turned into real-time bidding. What did programmatic mean to you when you first started into programmatic or first started into these deals? Was it network or RTB, or where did it start for you?
Absolutely. You know, it first started out in programmatic, where we had a private marketplace that we set up through the likes of an AdMeld. And there we set high floors for our CBS inventory, and where demand-side platforms, agency trading desks, and retargeters were able to come and bid on the inventory in real time. And we kind of went through a growing and learning phase. And that's where we kind of started and pick things back up.
And Greg, let's pick up with you, because you and I have talked a lot about this early days in the internet, and you've been one of the early adopters as well. Where did it start for you? I know we've talked a lot about networks in the past.
Yeah, well, we just a stat for everybody, about 20% of our inventory goes to indirect channels. And we were looking at that channel as a way to optimize the prices we were getting, but also solve for one of the complaints that we had, which was a lack of transparency. So with the advent of programmatic channels, we were able to secure higher prices for the inventory, as well as see more activity from the advertisers themselves. We could see who was buying the inventory. And so that's what sort of led us into the programmatic channel. And then very early on, we saw the promises of higher CPMs materialize, and so we kept investing more and more into the channel.
So what were your first programmatic deals? and Greg, let's stay with you for a second. What was the first programmatic deal you did? And then I want to talk, I'd like to hear from David, but.
Is it okay to say I'm not really sure? I think it happened before we knew it was happening. I think it really started when we coupled our inventory with exchanges, one of them being the Google Ad Exchange. And I think really the first programmatic deals came through that exchange before we realized it. We've since evolved and put a lot more effort around it, so we have a lot more understanding of it. But earlier on, the first one, it was sort of not really sure.
How about you, David?
And for us, from a programmatic perspective, it depends how you guys all define programmatic. CBS is very much similar to many publishers out here in this audience today. We have a big broadcasting arm. We have a very, very large digital publisher realm with over 250 million unique users across 23 different brands and sites. And so we actually started out testing out programmatic, I want to say 5 years ago, with other platforms and with other ad networks. But it didn't really materialize for us, and we ended up terminating that test. Jump forward to 2 years ago, where we started to have partnerships with AdMeld, with demand-side platforms and agency trading us. We started to be able to test some of our inventory across particular sites like GameSpot, like CNET, like Chiang. And we really found that there's a healthy appetite for buy-side platforms like Invite to come and purchase our inventory on behalf of the advertisers. And we saw really great healthy upticks from there and then evolved from that since.
So you both have big premium brands. You just talked about that. What made you really get involved with programmatic? Right? I hear a lot, and there's a lot of big brands here in the audience, but I hear a lot of, it's not going to be good for our brand. It's going to drive CPMs down. What was the decision that made you make that move and lean into it?
And so I think within the US right now, I think we have a concept of almost two separate budgets. And so there's this large brand budget out there, right, that takes over the sponsorships are there, the large vanity plays. And there's a huge contingent around our direct sales team really monetizing and selling through a lot of the inventory for those particular budgets. And a lot of the ad products that we've built within CBS Interactive are mainly geared towards direct sales. And they've consistently done a good job. But then there's a healthy tier of inventory that we have that's remaining where we don't have an ad product or solution for. And that inventory would be best geared for a direct response performance budget that we didn't really have a solution. And therefore, we started to, wanted to go out there and test and iterate to understand what that inventory would do across CBS Interactive and how we can monetize it. And so from that evolution, we found a middle tier of a means to monetize our inventory at great CPMs in a safe, transparent platform. And then we've been able to go and test and enable more properties and invest more in that as well.
So Greg, I'd like to hear from you on that, but I'd also like to follow up and say, when you made that decision, what was your organization's response to that? And did you have to sell it through? Was it something that you got a lot of pushback on?
That's a good question. So I guess I'll just describe a philosophical shift that happened in our organization probably about 5 years ago. And I think it probably applies to a lot of people here. We used to believe that we should try to think about what could go wrong before we took any action. And about 5 years ago, we shifted and we said, let's try and experiment and get data points. And when things do go wrong, then we'll react. And so that change of philosophy in our organization really paved the way for innovative things like programmatic to take root. And so when this did take place, certainly some of our direct sellers, and I should probably back up for a second, about 80% of our inventory is sold by salespeople. We're a premium sales group. We represent lots of American publishers, including Barnes & Noble, and Evite, an invitation service, QVC, some retailers. And so there was some conflict in the organization from the sellers. But ultimately, we found that programmatic was more replacing and improving upon the existing ad network business that we had on our sites. And as that became very apparent to the sellers, that conflict really didn't become much.
Did you find with the technology of programmatic that you could actually optimize those networks and use them as just as another demand channel within that play, or did you pull them out because the CPMs were higher that you were getting from the RTB?
Well, we still use them, and they are they typically don't drive the highest yields within the inventory that the indirect participants play on, including the exchanges and whatnot. So I think they've really become sort of the base monetization on top of which we build with programmatic. Occasionally we have a direct deal with an ad network for a very specific segment. For example, we have a lot of Canadian users, and so we might have a Canadian-specific network come in and do a direct deal for that inventory.
So obviously there's a shift in the way that you do business. From an organizational perspective, David, how did you guys at CBS tackle this? Where does this live? And has it always lived there? And then, Greg, I think you have a different perspective on this, so I'd love to switch to you after that.
Sure. So within CBS Interactive, we've got 3 business units at the top. One focused on tech, games, and lifestyle. The other one focused on our sports, news, and entertainment, or anything with the CBS in front of it. And then we have a third one focusing on our B2B business, or business to business. Where we sit is we sit as a central agency or central marketing team, right? And it seems like it facilitates more of an agency where we're able to help facilitate programmatic deals for the entire network, because at the end of the day, it's about scale and reach for finding a particular user/audience. And so with this central agency, we allocate whatever revenue we generate, we allocate it to the business unit. So we don't actually keep any of it for ourselves, and our overall goal is to grow holistically and not just grow our business unit. Because the concerns down the road was that we could be cannibalistic against direct sales, we could be taking opportunities away. But at the end of the day, the goal is to always complement direct sales in these business units and their strategic initiatives, and never to conflict. And we've seen programmatic be a good guy in helping build and get incremental dollars, not taking anything away.
So from the hand-to-hand, day-to-day, is that managed within operations within your teams?
Yes, it's managed within operations, because that's where we primarily started with first. Operations, taking a look at from a yield in terms of how the inventory is being monetized, from what sites, and who's actually the buyers from the advertiser perspective. So we've been able to look at it from the ground up more methodically to go at it from that perspective, and then partner with direct sales to go after particular advertisers at that end.
So it sounds like within operations, you guys do the testing, the understanding, the pricing, then you run it up through the business side to get the sign-off before you execute.
That's right.
Now, Greg, that sounds a little bit different than what I know of your business. Can you give us
Yeah, it is a little bit different. We're sort of, I guess, a hybrid where our direct sellers are very involved in the process. And we tend to set up a sort of a larger than normal amount of direct programmatic deals. So with a Kellogg, we'll have a direct deal with them, but it's managed programmatically for efficiency purposes. In a case like that, the seller is leading the charge. And the reason for that is that we typically have a large number of first-party data assets that we view as I think Benita said it really well. I mean, it's our audience data and our audience attributes are the most valuable parts of our business. And so when those assets are involved, we want the best people on the street who know how to value those things strategically to be in that conversation, and those are our sellers. We don't think a machine can tell us the strategic value of that data asset. That's our sales team. So they typically set up the deal, and then they partner with the operations side of our business. Sort of I think the origination is different from your business, but the end result is the same. Both operations and sales partner in the end. So, all right, let's shift gears a little bit, because you started talking about almost segmentation of inventory or other people getting involved. So I guess the question really is, how do you segment your inventory? How do you make the decision on what's sold directly, what's sold in the indirect programmatic channels, right? And then in that way is what your sales team touches and what just goes RTB, what goes into private exchanges. How do you start to think about that before you involve anybody from a strategic perspective, and looking at your different inventory types, your different formats, and segmenting that out? And then I'd like to get into how you think about pricing that as well. So I'll jump in. we essentially let the programmatic buyers get the inventory right after our direct sold programs. And there's really two reasons for that. The first reason is the direct buyers tend to want their inventory to be delivered smoothly. And so therefore, we need to have a very solid understanding of the inventory size and capacity. The second reason is we don't think there's enough demand currently to drive the highest price possible to beat our direct sales team's prices. Occasionally that happens, but on the average, the programmatic deals we see are, the CPMs are falling sort of, if you will, between the ad networks and the direct sales team CPMs. Sort of it's created a new pricing tier in our inventory. And so it's there as a result. We would love to experiment with that as things change. We're not religious about this at all. But so I'd say that those are the two primary reasons why we put it right after our direct sold campaigns.
So when it kicks from direct sold, if it doesn't get sold by a direct sales team, is that into a private marketplace, or is that into a fully open? So it sounds like it would sit above networks. You'd almost have direct, preferred, private networks, RTB. Am I putting it together right?
Wow. Yeah, I think so. So it goes direct, then private exchanges. And those are the direct programmatic deals I was mentioning before with Kellogg's and Allstate and Kimberly-Clark and Ford. And after that, the waterfall goes down to Google Ad Exchange and then whatever ad network deals we have in place.
David, how about for you? If you can kind of walk us through how you think about the different inventory. Because I think it's different, very different for you by site as well and by brand.
Right. It's very, very different from site because we have, in one vertical for our tech, gaming, and lifestyles vertical, maybe more suitable, more accretive to the programmatic experience. And then in the middle portion with CBS News, CBS Sports, or CBS.com, where our own private Hulu solution, where we have our video of our full episodes there, there's such high sell-through, well over 80%, that there isn't really an opportunity for us to go at it from a programmatic perspective. And then B2B is more similar to tech, games, and lifestyles. And so we actually stepped through, and the relationship between CBS and Google has evolved significantly over the last 2.5 years. When we first got started, we would pretty much be very, very restrictive and pretty much blocked almost everyone outside of our real-time bidding, right? And in that scenario, it allowed us insights to understand, which ad vertical, who was coming in wanting to bid on our inventory? How much of an overlap did that have with our direct sales team? Understand how much were they willing to pay for that inventory across standard rotational media? And all those insights, gave us a lot more comfort to understand, okay, look, we think we can drive this much incremental revenue because there's no overlap, right? And it's just going to be icing on the cake at the end of the day. And as we started off with our tech, games, and lifestyles vertical, getting that inventory right after direct sales in a very similar construct. But in that scenario, we've facilitated more of a private marketplaces deal where real strategic real-time bidders can have access to the inventory first, whether it's a first look solution right after direct sales, setting up a preferred deal for a one-on-one advertiser, or even a private auction after that when we're comfortable with an overall buyer and been able to negotiate a price floor there. And then after that, it falls under more of the open exchange, where anyone can come and bid on the inventory for standard IEB rotational inventory. That's 300 by 250s, 728 by 90s, and 1600 by 600s. And that's where we allow some ad networks to come in and on a fixed price basis bid on the inventory there too, thereby creating an organic floor at the bottom to create scarcity at the top. Hopefully that made sense.
No, it's good, but it shows you how labor intensive it is to get it set up. But once it's set up, it seems like it flows pretty nicely from an operational perspective. How do you price it? Right? How do you figure out the right price? I mean, there's been companies for years that have been trying to be in that business, yield management, and all these things just around pricing alone, and it's been a challenge. How do you guys do it and do it so well?
We've been trying to use comparables through other publishers out in the marketplace that look like us, understanding what their price floors have been, and then taking that into consideration, measured against our direct sales team as well. And then this is a lot of iterative testing, right? At a floor where we felt comfortable with some of the inventory that we have, almost analogous to a discounted direct sales rate between $4 to $6, right? And then there's elements in there whether we allow the buy side to know what site this is running on, right? And then allowing them certain access to particular areas of inventory. And then as time evolves, we may peel back some of those layers of the onion to figure out, how much more incremental revenue did we drive from an overall ECPM basis as well as fill. And as time has evolved, we've been getting more comfortable opening outside of just standard rotational, but also having access to our front doors, our home pages, or even category doors or side home pages. And so there's been a lot more flexibility as we've seen people come and bid and show progress on our inventory.
So before I move on to Greg, why is that? Is it all yield based, and your senior management team and yourself are saying, okay, it's all about yield now, so we will push it through this channel in a branded fashion?
Yes, it is about yield. It's about understanding who's the bidder and who's the buyer from an advertiser perspective, because we will very much close the door on someone that has a huge direct sales relationship with our team. But if it's incremental and it's a relationship that we don't have, it's a great lead-in. It's a great lead gen. Hey, look, get a taste for our inventory here. It did wonders for you from a attribution perspective, whether you're measuring, depending on what you're measuring against, click-through rates or performance. And then, that has driven up more discussions with our direct sales team saying, hey, look, if you want to get guaranteed, or if you want to buy this on a more of a sponsorship basis, it's opened up doors to have those conversations. We may not have had them before in the past.
Greg, how are you thinking about the rate cards and the pricing? Is it similar?
I think it's similar, yes. We really have, if you will, three main monetization elements in our inventory. We have the direct sales channel, and that has a floor. We have a rate card. We let our sellers discount up to 20%, and then they get talked to. Then there's I'll save this more complicated part for the last, but the direct programmatic guys have a floor as well. But for the programmatic buyers that access our inventory through exchanges and whatnot, we actually don't have any floors at all, and we let the advertisers compete on a complete pure auction basis, and let them decide what's the most valuable impression. And over the years, I think we got the stats this morning, since 2010, the CPMs of our indirect channel have gone up 70%, 70% since 2010. And that's up to $1.50 from, I think it was 70 some odd cents before. So that auction and that competition we view as just a very good way of driving up demand and the prices. Now, cutting back to that middle part, the direct programmatic guys, we do have floors in place for them. And part of that's because the setup costs of a direct programmatic deal are pretty high right now. It's very early, even in the US, it's very early. And we set those floors in part to ensure we get our costs back, and also because there isn't that much demand yet in that tier. And as that changes, I think those price restraints will be pulled away.
So, David talked about yield, and that drives branded versus non-branded placement, things like that. You obviously represent a lot of different brands and make decisions on their behalf, but need to get their sign-off. How does branded versus non-branded in placement work for you? Is it a similar decision-making process, or is it, how's it going with Liberty?
We only, so every advertiser type, programmatic direct, and direct, compete relatively equally for the inventory. So we don't have branded versus unbranded, or this size or that size or this part of the page. The only delineation we have right now, and I think this is going to change very soon, this year, are the native ads that we have on our sites, the custom ads that we have on our site. We're going to push those into the programmatic channels, because ultimately what we're after, we represent all these branded publishers, is we fundamentally believe it's a better user experience to serve the right ad to the right customer at the right time. And so if we can get our native ads, our custom ads, if you will, which are odd shapes and have odd behaviors, if you will, we want to get those same machines deciding on what users should get which of those ads as well.
No, that's very interesting. That's actually the first time I heard about native going in programmatic. I've heard about a lot of different formats, obviously mobile video and other things too. Direct programmatic, your sales teams selling directly, then taking another tranche of inventory and pushing it through the programmatic channels for preferred type deals, one-to-one advertiser deals, and probably even negotiating a lot of the private exchange deals that both of you have talked about today. How do you view that at your company? Is it something that, I mean, obviously when you start talking about, you know, formats like native, to me, if I'm a direct sales guy, I start to say, wait a minute, these are things that are really in my toolbox. I can start to sell for a lot more money to my advertisers. They're now going to be pushed through a programmatic channel. Has that created conflict? How do you deal with that? Let's start with you, Greg, because you led us there, but I quickly want to move to CBS.
Sure. I mean, our sellers are very excited about this, in part because we've enabled them to sell something that is unique in the marketplace. We think we're sort of first adopters of this technology, and that gives the sellers something to differentiate themselves with. And as publishers, I think we all know that that's one of the keys to success. It also, because it typically involves our first-party data assets about our customers, the conversations we have with advertisers are far more strategic. We're not talking to the agencies. Typically, we're talking to the advertisers directly. And it's a very senior person at that advertiser itself. So the sellers are excited because it's new, it's differentiating, but also because it's driving much more engaged dialogues with direct advertisers. And it's a very strategic thing that is not about commoditization of the inventory. It's about how do we create the best possible experience. And so the sellers have been pretty excited about that. It's a big leap, though, the amount of technology that these guys have to understand. And Dave and I were talking about this before, how interested he and I are about all the buy-side tools that people use. We're having to expose our sellers to the Invite platform and training them on how all this stuff works so they can create the right solutions for advertisers. So from an internal training standpoint, there's been a lot of change in and around what we teach sellers. But the backdrop is that they've been, glomming onto this, or a better word is they're very excited about engaging this because it's helping them sell more effectively, essentially.
So I assume if they're excited, then you comp them on the programmatic as well as the direct sales?
We do,
okay.
Yeah. We don't complicate things by having variable commission plans by margin.
There's no real channel conflict at all.
Yeah, we're investing, I'd say, heavily in the programmatic channel. So, our margins are a little bit less in programmatic right now because of the high investment, but we think that's very much going to pay off in spades as we lead in the marketplace and what have you. And so, because we're paying our sellers the same commission, it's a little bit lower margin for us. But again, that's coming in the form of our investment in the channel.
Actually, I want to dig into margins, but I'd like to hear from David first about CBS and how that works. I know it's been very sensitive, as that has been for a lot of organizations, but what are you guys facing? Is there a lot of friction there, and how have you kind of worked around that?
With regards to native placements?
No, I'm sorry. With regards to direct versus programmatic sales, your direct sales team, are they feeling threatened by programmatic coming in? How's that working for you guys? Because I know with a lot of different brands for CBS, you can't do any programmatic there, and I think that's been one of the driving factors. But you tell me, you know better than I do.
No, that's actually very true. I think with our direct sales team, I think with some of the business units that we have, I think we're almost seen as holistically as one team, right? If anything, our operations and our central marketing team comes at it from the perspective of we're maybe more subject matter experts in all things programmatic. And we bring these opportunities to the direct sales team. And the direct sales team gets to evaluate, we'll look at it holistically and for this advertiser A. And if it seems like there's nothing big going on with advertiser A from the direct sales perspective, we'll likely push forward and execute this campaign. And so in that scenario, when we execute and deliver against it, we all get comped in that same way. There's no channel conflict where we're taking one and feeding the other. All of us will get comped holistically. We'll all reap in the benefits, right? And I think everyone that's resulted in very favorable and positive feedback saying, look, programmatic has helped with these buys for these strategic advertisers and kept the light on for some of them. And there are some other business units that are going to be slower to adopt, right? Some other business units that have huge tentpole events, like we've got with the Grammys or the Super Bowls. And in those scenarios, they're primarily driven by direct sales, by sponsorships, and native placements. And in those situations, programmatic hasn't always been accretive to those properties, but may in the future. And we're going to be ones that are very excited to learn, iterate more, and then slowly test that out to see how it builds against the current use case or the current business opportunities for those particular properties.
So when your salespeople are out talking to, it sounds to me like they'd have to be talking to the trading desks, the holding companies, the direct marketers themselves, and then the opcos within the holding companies. Is that accurate for the most part?
That is accurate from our perspective.
So are they out there then saying, well, we've got all these super custom units that we can do across CBS. Then we've also, in a preferred one-to-one type scenario, we can do a lot of different IAB format, traditional IAB format type advertising. And then we've also got private exchange. Are they selling the whole suite and looking for incremental dollars within programmatic outside of just direct? Is that how the conversation goes, or is it more they stick to direct and then the incremental dollars flow in?
The best part of those conversations is that maybe 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, we weren't in the room. We didn't have a place. It was only direct sales representing everything. And then in some situations, getting it right, and others not, right? And now it's leap forward to the current day, present day. We have a presence in that room. We can speak to how can we execute this from a programmatic perspective, either to sweeten the overall direct sales opportunity or go off as a separate one working with the trading desk, right, or the op operations. So there's now a play for us to have that conversation, to be coupled in, and to grow the overall discussion, and when that wasn't there earlier on. And so a lot of the agency companies, along with our direct sales teams, we go out to New York and have these strategic discussions, try to structure something at a rate card basis, or try to make it happen now from a preferred deal perspective within Google, right, where we're just able to maybe offer a little bit more than just the rotational inventory and see how that executes. So this is actually current day. This is basically, let's say, last week or the week before. So we think there's a favorable opportunity there, and we're working strategically with the advertisers/agencies to make that happen.
So from a margin perspective, would you both ultimately and Greg, you can jump in with this, but would you both ultimately like the technology to do a lot of these where buyers can actually go on and find the preferred deals, the private deals, transact with you, and then your sales team really only focuses on that super custom? And let me give you a little insight. The way I think about that is maybe that super custom inventory shrinks a little bit, but your CPMs are then 10x because you're doing much bigger things, not just native, but formats on top of that.
I would say yes, but I would change the definition of custom. I'd say custom would be anything that's native in odd shapes and sizes of ads that are not typical. But I'd also include any deal that includes a first-party data asset. Anytime that's in play, I want my sellers involved. And I mentioned before that they're the ones who we pay a lot of money to understand the strategic value of that asset. And so I don't think technology is going to solve that for me. But everything else, I'd say, yes, the technology can make the transaction much more efficient. And I think Maxime's presentation earlier that showed the coupling of DFA with DFP, where we wouldn't have to shuttle creatives back and forth. That's very good news. We embrace the technology up to the point where our most valuable assets are involved, and the data is one of those where I just draw the line, where I just want to have a lot of control over that.
So let's stay on data for a minute, because you've talked a lot about it today. And when I speak to a lot of publishers, they're all about buying third-party data, but yet they don't have a first-party data strategy. You haven't mentioned anything around third-party. You're just talking about your first-party data. What do you think the big value is there around your data, and how are you utilizing it to drive that value, whether it's programmatic or direct?
Yeah, well, we happen to have some unique data assets. One of them is presence of child in household, yes or no, and that's just a scarce data point that makes it's very valuable. And so we offer that to sellers to sell directly. We offer it to our programmatic direct buyers to use both on our site, but while they're buying on our site, we also let them use that data in their buys off our site. But again, only when they're buying our media. So the data asset is used as it's very valuable. The advertisers have told us it's very valuable, more valuable than the third-party sources that they use. So we use it as a bargaining chip to basically drive sales, both on our site, and if they use it off our site, we command a small price for that as well. So I think we're a bit unique. A lot of our sites are transactional in nature. I think, David, you guys have a lot of very premium content. So we see people buying things, buying books and buying skis and bikes. And that purchase intent is just very different and valuable that makes our data asset a bit unique. And then the fact that we have all these mothers inviting people to their kids' birthday parties and telling us how the age of their children, those are very unique assets as well that we're leveraging very effectively in all of our channels, except for the indirect, the non-programmatic.
Do you think about data similarly? How are you guys using it?
Yeah, we have a data product solution as well, very similar to Greg's, where we've been able to take the first-party data that we have across the 23 different brands and sites and sell them on a guaranteed basis towards strategic advertisers. That's data with the inventory coupled together, and basically run interest-based advertising on their behalf across our owned and operated sites. We've been evaluating enabling that data to be leveraged for the preferred deals right under direct sales and also for private auctions, and have been discussing with the buy side as well as strategic advertisers in terms of how to consume that inventory. And right now, for us on the programmatic space, leveraging the first-party data is an area that we're evolving and going to enable to do, but haven't found yet the right opportunity, the right deal as of yet.
So I want to circle back on margins for a second, because all the fat in these deals can't be just paying the sales teams. So can we dig into some of the challenges that you're seeing right around programmatic, around all the different layers of inventory that you push through the programmatic channel, and where you find that operationally it's been a challenge, or where you find that the margins aren't exactly where you'd like them to be yet, so we can highlight some of that for the audience.
So maybe one area of areas of opportunity that for programmatic is that although it's fantastic for real-time bidding and for those advertisers there, we also still have ad networks strategic ad networks that we work with that come in and fill at the bottom to ensure there's a healthy bidding ecosystem for our inventory. And so for these ad networks that we inject into the system to leverage AdX as a yield optimization platform, those are still done on the traditional IO basis. Right, that's where we have to have a form, have them fill it out, go through the signing and faxing process that we still have today, and then execute. And so that can take, whenever we add a new property in or make adjustments on an annual basis, that can take over 2.5 to 3 weeks to operationalize. And that's just something that's kind of, I think, we think evolving as we go towards a more automated basis. But those are areas where I think programmatic, as it continues to evolve, and with all the buy-side players in the ecosystem, will hopefully adjust and hopefully capture some of those incremental margins that we'd like to get due to kind of the operational structures that are currently in place today.
So, Greg, do you have other challenges to add to that hurt the margins?
Well, I wouldn't say that, they're challenges, but it's with any new technology and new trend in the marketplace, if you're going to be sort of a first adopter, it's a little bit more expensive, and that expense isn't borne out in terms of money spent. It's expense in terms of the seniority and the number of people who are involved in developing the channel. And right now, programmatic sits within a very senior group of our company, thinking about it strategically and also sourcing resources to it effectively so we can grow it. And so it's expensive right now from a human capital standpoint. Setting up all the various technology partners, as David points out, takes time. All that is going to melt away shortly. It's not a persistent margin hit, if you will. It's a one-time thing, and we view this as a very valuable investment overall. So I wouldn't really characterize it as a negative margin. I think it's a very good investment.
So then how do you measure success? If you don't look at margin, How do you think about it? And that might, might be a tough question.
Dollars.
Top line revenue?
Yeah, and we have seen the dollars flow. You know, with the direct channels, Kellogg has spent a lot of money on our properties via programmatic methods. And this is an advertiser who existed on our sites before, who advertised this much, and then through programmatic channel advertised this much. I don't think that's typical necessarily, but it's certainly the right direction for us. And secondarily, I lost my train of thought there in Kellogg's. I think I'm hungry. I'll pass it back to you.
All right, well,
But I would say, even though I think what's interesting is that with the executive teams at CBS Interactive, they define us as the most profitable team within all of CBS Interactive. Although we are seen as the central marketing tier at the bottom, surfacing all the business units, we're semi-regarded as our own BU now, our own business unit as well. And in that regard, based on the revenue that we bring in, even minus the overhead costs, right, that come in order to support the programmatic basis, we are still the most profitable team there. And that's a good sign, that's a good feeling, and that's why I think there's more investment in, as long as we can make sure we're doing it intelligently, enabling programmatic deals intelligently across our entire content network.
so we've talked a lot about different formats, inventory, things like that. Let's shift to programmatic everywhere, right? So mobile, whether that's a high-end, device, a tablet. Greg, let's start with you. How are you thinking about mobile? We've had a lot of conversations around this: CPM success, fill rate success. How do you think about it?
Mobile kind of caught us by surprise. It went from 10% of our inventory to 30% of our inventory in the course of a year. And so we're still trying to catch up with that consumer adoption. And we really haven't seen much success of programmatic in the mobile channel yet, unless it's flowing through some of our indirect partnerships that we have in place. So we would love it to see that take place in mobile as well, because we saw those CPMs rise on the web. Again, 7% over 2 years is a dramatic increase. If we saw those same increases in mobile, obviously it'd be very welcome. For the complexity of mobile are pretty high. And so I'm surmising or guessing that is why we haven't seen the programmatic channel affect mobile as fast or currently. But I wouldn't characterize us as being the most savvy mobile publisher out there, and I'm actually very curious to see what David has to say about this.
Yeah, mobile's been pretty tough across the board. I think tablet, we've almost separated out and carved it into its own little vertical or type of channel for us monetizing that inventory, and that's analogous to almost video CPMs that we've seen. But strictly for mobile web and also mobile in-app, we have seen that same traffic migration as well. And it's tough because with mobile, it's fewer impressions and a smaller inventory size, 300 by 50, 320 by 50. And then we also have something immersive like a takeover or an interstitial. And that's it. And there's the ecosystem, specifically from an RTB play or maybe from an ad network perspective, may not be as mature as where we are on desktop display. And so we're getting to a point where I think we're monetizing pretty well, but it's a continually evolving step for us as well.
It's good to hear we're not that far behind.
I think a lot of it actually is on us too, with aggregation of demand. We heard the question here earlier about AdMob and things like that. So there's some things that we're doing. We've seen both CPM and fill raise dramatically. We just have to do a little bit more of it. It's coming quickly. So I've got one question, David, for you on video. We've seen video formats grow 3x across our exchange in the last year. What are you doing on a video perspective with the programmatic?
Video has been very interesting for us. I think if there's an investment that we're making heavily, it's to go heavier into video. I think we've got a wealth of properties that have enabled tests on the programmatic video perspective across sites like CNET and GameSpot and Chow and Last.fm. And there's some that in some particular sites that they haven't needed our help, like the full episodes on CBS.com or CBS Sports. So that's okay, right? Because there's really high direct sales sell-through there. But in the inventory that we do have, and then us also bringing on board rep relationships, external relationships that we've been able to exclusively monetize their video in-stream inventory, we've seen somewhere like over 150 to 200 million impressions, in-stream, pre-roll, mid-roll impressions on a monthly basis. And going programmatic has been fantastic for us because we've been able to get that advertiser level transparency and yet see the CPMs that have been really good for us. And I guess there's so much scarcity in video right now that even if we have a direct sold relationship, right, there isn't really the concern of cannibalization because of that scarcity. The advertisers / buy side just say, give me more, I'll take whatever I can get. And then they've also been buying it programmatically as well. And so the CPMs have been great. The advertisers are solid. The experiences are great. I think the thing for us right now, and then we've also tested TrueView, right? And TrueView CPMs have been really great for us because it shows that users are actually sitting through and watching the advertisements running on our site. And that's a good feeling because it's good creative as long as good content. I think the only thing that we've mainly learned from video thus far is that it's not like display from an operations perspective. Display is where you can have a tag, whether it's JavaScript or iframe tag, and quickly run it. Video feels more like software, right? And you've got to debug it, make sure it works, because if you inject it and it breaks, users are not going back to the content, right? It's a showstopper. So we have to make sure that it's somewhat seamless and continuous rather than having users go through a tough user experience.
So I feel like we've covered the spectrum, right? From where it started from you guys to where you are today. You guys have seen the evolution of this. I'll close with the last question of where do you see programmatic 5 years from now? And give David a second to catch up. And
Okay. All right, 5 years from now, programmatic.
Or two, maybe. I picked 5. But.
Well, maybe I can break that question apart and say there's 3 things that are on my mind about 5 years from now, and certainly programmatic is underpins all of these things. And so number one, what data assets can I learn about my customers that I can surface for advertisers? That's very, very high up there. And so we're constantly trying to get more information from our customers, our users, I should say, and then trying to make those portable for advertisers, both programmatically but also on-site. So that data is number one. Number 2 is content creation. I mentioned we have a lot of transaction-centric websites, and these e-commerce transaction-centric websites are becoming more like media companies, which drives more engagement. So that's something we focus on a lot, and that obviously feeds more inventory for the programmatic channels. And then lastly, and I alluded to this before, I truly think that programmatic would be short of media expectations if it stuck to standard IAB units. I really think that the creative evolution or revolution is very, very much going to happen over the next 5 years. And so making sure that we're tinkering and experimenting with the right ad shapes at the right time for customers on our website is a big part of it. So we're already starting to experiment with custom units for programmatic, and I think that's going to be a very prevalent thing 5 years from now, because why wouldn't you use a machine that was very good at choosing the right ad for the right customer at the right time for all ad shapes? I don't think it should just be standard IAB sizes. So those 3 things are sort of the top things in my mind for programmatic over the next 5 years.
Did you want to take a swing at it? Or?
How can I follow that? Jesus, no.
Should we close with that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is, I think following on top of that is there's going to be, the publishers are always going to be kind of at the whim of the advertiser / buy side. So we'll continually evolve as they're pointing the direction. I think that where data is going to be a huge component, taking third-party sources and verifying the user base that's currently out there. I think that's an initiative that's consistently going to drive forward. I think there's also a huge portion from the publisher perspective. We're going to try to automate as much of the sales channel process as possible to drive efficiencies, to make sure that we're able to get these campaigns up and running to see that revenue sooner. And then I would say that's probably at the midpoint at the 2.5 years, and maybe at the 5-year perspective where we will be able to do the right ad to the right person at the right time. And so I think of advertising as maybe a little bit more immature version of merchandising in some situation. So I think we're going to be able to, drive something that's relevant, whether it's from an action perspective, a conversion for a purchase. But I think we're going to be able to have those great signals to tell and help predict what the user will need in driving a better holistic experience from both the content as well as the monetization perspective.
Great, thank you guys. So I know we saved time to open it up for questions, so we're happy to hand out microphones if people want to raise their hands and ask some questions of these guys or myself. Did I ask too many questions? I didn't leave any? Yes.
Hi. You were talking about mobile. I was just wondering, are you seeing faster growth on the app side or on the browser side?
I'll jump in that first. By orders of magnitude on the mobile web side, 90% of our mobile inventory is mobile web, 10% is application. And so the monetization is actually skewed even higher than that because the complexities of serving ads into an app versus mobile web. So our investment on the mobile side is, from an advertising monetization standpoint, is right now exclusively on mobile web. We actually dropped monetization on some of the apps because it was just so hard given how much volume there was. We're not necessarily typical, right? We're not a weather site that has such massive user bases in mobile apps. It just so happens that our properties are very, they drive high engagement on the mobile web. They don't need an app to drive that engagement. So, so we just made that decision to invest that way. And that 90-10 split, I think, is not uncommon.
Yeah, I think we're more like maybe 60-40, 60 on the mobile web side and 40 on the in-app side. Yeah, very similar.
Yes.
Can you describe the infrastructure, the teams, and the special functions that you have organized inside the company, or if any function is outside of the team?
So within our team, from the monetization aspect, we have partner managers that kind of do both BD as well as existing account management deals, right? And we have one broken out by mobile, video, and then also desktop display. Then we have a separate operations team under us as well. And here we have one subject matter expert to help manage traffic and deliver against the mobile video and display sites. And then we actually have one person solely focused on more analytics, forecasting, revenue recognition processes to ensure that we've built these almost real-time dashboards internally to understand how the inventory is pacing, right? How much we're receiving, how our ECPMs are responding to that, and then if there's any glitch or concerns, we're able to track that down pretty quickly. It's that structure that we have similar for the Americas, and I think we've replicated that for EMEA as well as APAC as well. And then to answer your holistic question, we also have within that team, we work cross-functionally with our finance, accounting teams. We have a yield team and direct sales to make sure that everyone is in the know when we have maybe a large deal with an advertiser. So we can formulate an answer relatively quickly and understand what to price and package and go out with there.
Was your question focused on the programmatic teams or the greater company itself? The greater company, yeah. So we have our sellers, and then we have our indirect sellers, the business development people who work with the ad networks and the exchanges, and also the programmatic. So the people who used to exclusively manage ad networks now manage the programmatic technology as well. The exception being what I said before, the sellers originate these deals, and then move over to the operations and the business development teams. Outside of that, we have a business intelligence team who's responsible for pulling all of our data assets out of our database and make them understood and known. And we have quite a large team of database engineers who are, as I mentioned before, learning more about our customers and making them actionable for advertisers. Outside of that, we have a large operations team who traffic ads, who have very, very administrative roles, a finance group, a legal group, and then a custom solutions group, which functions like an in-house agency. We build a lot of creative in-house for advertisers. And we do that with our in-house team, but they also work with a number of agencies as well around the world to build custom native ads for advertisers.
We have other questions? We have a microphone coming for you.
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about video, the video inventory, how you're monetizing your video properties?
Sure thing. So within video, I mean, the high level is that our direct sales does sell a really high, a big chunk of that inventory, and let's say well north of 60% is sold through. So whatever remainder that we have left, we run them through AdX as well as some other partnerships as well. And then we're able to determine and set high floors essentially initially where, let's say, demand side platforms, the agency trained us have ability to get a first crack at it. Then it goes more into an open exchange where maybe a larger set of bidders can have a chance to go and win that inventory as well. So we've got multiple setups from a private exchange perspective and more of an open exchange perspective, and then and usually by then we're actually 100% sold through across both U.S. and Canada as well. So that's how we've been able to monetize it.
Okay, looks like there's no more questions. I would just say in closing, Benita and Maxime spoke today around the technology's there. It's ready. So hopefully you took away from today the fact that you can take advantage of that technology stack to start leaning into programmatic, but learning from us around some of the challenges that we had, but also learning from the fact there's a tremendous amount of work and testing that needs to go in to get ready for programmatic, to get ready to do the right things for your business and take advantage of the ultimate yield that you'd like to take advantage of. So hopefully you took that away from today. And I'd like to thank both Greg and David for their time and for joining me here in Latin America. This is a fantastic experience. So thanks to all of you.